here. Or Lene, should we wait for Robert first, or should we just get started, do you think?
We can get started.
Okay. So thanks for everyone for coming today. This is you know, these are very important intersecting topics and urgent topics to hear about and learn about, and that should be uplifted more. My name is Bijan. I'm from the Los Angeles Tenants Union, Northeast Local. And I've been helping support reclaim and rebuild our community's efforts to find permanent affordable housing for our unhoused members and housing insecure members, and as well as fight to and to pressure Caltrans to relinquish the vacant homes to the El Sereno Community Land Trust. The housing crisis in LA is no joke right now. There's some really horrifying facts and figures to back it up. And obviously it's a systemic issue that's connected to public health, mental health, policing, gentrification, and how the state has been allocating its funding and resources seems to be, a little out of whack. The priorities don't seem to be putting the well-being of the people first and foremost. So that's what we're here to speak on. And yeah, and so we want to get started with a land acknowledgement first.
Well, and I'm just going to jump in real quick. Also,
yeah,
we are going to do Q&A at the end for just like the interest of time and thoroughness, because I think there's going to be a lot of questions that come up that will be answered by potentially other speakers. So we're going to be doing Q&A at the end. And for anyone who has to drop for other obligations, we are recording this and it will be unlisted on YouTube, and I'll share that out with folks afterward. So that's all. Sorry, go ahead, B.
Yeah, that's it. And if and then after all the speakers go, I'll do a little I'll say a little bit about how we can how reporters can ask questions. But for now, we're going to do a land acknowledgement, and our reclaimers are going to speak a little bit. Iris, would you like to begin with the land acknowledgement?
This is a message from Grandma Gloria from the Tongva Nation. Good morning, welcome to Tongva land. Before this was Los Angeles, this was the state of California. Before this was the United States, this was Tongva. Our villages occupied the Los Angeles basin, 4 of the Channel Islands, parts of Orange County shared with the Hachemi relatives, a part of Malibu shared with our Chumash relatives, into San Bernardino and Riverside counties. In this area of land, we have ocean, fresh waterways, and mountains. We had everything to live a peaceful life with an abundance of hunted and gathered food, clear, clean water, clean air, or redwood plank canoes, and freshwater tool vessels. Upon colonization, they tried to change us, to erase what they considered was uncivilized, put our children in schools, cut our hair, they raped our women, they brought disease, they gave us alcohol and sold us slaves to the ranchos where the Olvera Street Plaza now sits. They stole our children and took them to Europe to be used as sexual slaves. We endured many abuses and brutalities, but we have survived. We are strong, we are resilient, and we have the things that the colonizers tried to erase. We have our culture, language, regalia, medicines, and our food, our plants. Our ancestors planted the seeds they could not destroy. You walk upon my lands. You may live and drive upon them, but you are still on my ancestral lands under all this concrete. Please walk with respect and honor to my ancestors who are buried under the concrete and hidden places still undisturbed. Welcome to Tongva land. Gloria Arellanes, Tongva elder.
Thank you, Iris. And now we have Emille here, who is a unhoused member of Reclaim and Rebuild Our Community, to speak about her experiences and you know, what our position here. Go ahead, Emille.
Hello, my name is Emille Tokic. I am 58 years old and I was raised here in El Sereno. I get so emotional. From the age of 6, so I'm 58. My last name is Croatian American and I was raised with the Hispanics on my mother's side, which I am so blessed that I have that culture in me. They were from native of Zacatecas, from the Chichimeca indigenous tribe. So how can I explain to you? I was married, happily married. My marriage went sour and here I am homeless. It could happen to anybody. I was happy living in a home, being well taken care of by my husband, raising my 4 kids who are now adults. So I had to take these drastic measures to reclaim a home. These homes are just sitting here in El Sereno for 20 some years. And I did what I had to do. They're state owned. I'm a taxpayer, my family's a taxpayer. So I felt I deserved to live in a home, and I do. And along with my 23 reclaiming family reclaimers from RROC. And I'm just very displeased with Kevin DeLeon, his actions. When he sat in the Senate seat, he did nothing for El Sereno, nothing, not one iota. Now he's our councilman-elect. He fails to speak with us. He took our initiative and he's running with it without consulting with us. ROH and RROC are very organized. And there's this narrative that's circling that we're lowlives, we're no good, we don't work, we want to leech, and that is negative. Shame on those people who are stating that about us. All we want is a home to live in. And I made some notes because I cannot retain information. It's very depressing sleeping in your truck. That's all I gained out of my divorce is my pickup truck. Thank God for the cab in the back. And so if I'm not in the hotel that the GoFundMe page is helping me with, God bless them for that, I'm in my truck. It's very depressing. I had 2 full knee replacements last year, and I haven't, one of my knees are giving me problems. Just imagine sleeping in a truck. I have hypothyroidism, so I'm always cold, and lack of circulation. And this was just like a huge tornado that just blew me away. Anybody could be homeless, anybody. And so I just want to say on my notes, because I caught COVID. So the end of November, I caught COVID and it hit me very hard. I'm still having the post side effects, which is difficult breathing, and I'm still taking medication. And it could have occurred during the take. Some of the CHP officers were not wearing masks, and they went in like narcotics officers and aggressively hogtied young children and pushing out abuelitas. I wrote something here because I can't, like I said, I can't retain it. So this is years of reckless policies and elected officials who tweet shallow suggestions, regurgitate unoriginal solutions to a situation none of which we can fully understand. And there is a disconnection between the community, yet they want our vote. So we ask for Kevin DeLeon to support us and speak with us. How does he know our needs if he doesn't speak with the community? And also I'd like to say to Senator Durazo, with the false statements that she made towards RROH and possibly ROH, that we are not from El Sereno, we have no jobs, and as if we're leeches. We just want a home. We are serious people who are homeless. So I say to Senator Durazo, I am from Sereno. I was raised here by my indigenous grandmother. Shame on you. Shame on you. I've been here since the early 60s and I'm not going anywhere. I love my neighborhood that's nestled in LA. So get it correct next time, Senator. Also, what else do I have to say, if you don't mind? 20 years of these homes just rotting. I can't stress anymore to Kevin DeLeon. It's hard for me to say my councilman when he has done nothing, not one iota for us. Come speak with us. Ask us what we need. You don't know what we need. All we want is to have a sit down and peacefully speak about our situation. Oh, and one other thing. This morning, could be on Fox 11 News, he stated that he wanted to build 25,000 module homes in Los Angeles. Sounds like he's gonna be running for mayor. And it's just horrible how these elected officials, they're just in it for money and not for the people. It's very sad. So I guess that kind of sums it up. And one more thing, Caltrans needs to leave their slumlords. The houses are left for over 25 years. What does that tell you? What in the hell does that tell you? They didn't give a hoot. But all of a sudden, De Leon wants to run with our initiative. All of a sudden. So Caltrans, you need to leave. You're slumlords. You did nothing for our neighborhood. RROC, we want our community back. So I challenge you to please come speak with us. And you have to leave, Caltrans. Enough is enough. You have blood on your hands. You need to leave. And we need our homes on the land trust, El Sereno Land Trust, so we can take care of our land. We know better. And thank you very kindly for hearing me out. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Emille.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Emille. Sorry, my computer seems to be, my connection seems to be a little bit slow right now. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thanks.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Emille, for that. That was, thank you for sharing that. So we're going to now go to Bita Amani, Ph.D. She is Associate Professor of Urban Public Health at Charles R. Drew University, and is also the co-chair of the UCLA Charles Drew University Task Force on Racism and Equity at the Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science. I hope I got that right. So Bita is gonna speak a little bit about kind of the intersection between politics, race, health, and housing. So yeah, Bita, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the organizers of this event to invite me here today to talk about the intersection.
Are others having a hard time hearing?
Yeah, sorry, Bita. It's you're a little bit broken up. Maybe, do you mind maybe turning off your video to help the connection a little bit? I'm sorry to ask that.
No worries. Is it better now?
We can hear you, like, you can hear, but it's very choppy. Do you want, maybe?
If you give me a second,
Oh, that's perfect.
oh, is it? Okay,
Yeah, no,
great.
you sound
Okay,
great. Thank you.
okay, great. So thank you again to the organizers who invited me here to talk about the intersections of housing and justice and health. The irony should not escape us that we're having this press conference today about housing justice, which is ultimately an issue of property and how it's valued more than human life, on stolen land whose value was built through the exploitation and dehumanization of the very same people who are denied it. Also, the irony does not escape me how we're having this conversation about the importance of housing and how we systematically deny it to Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities in the middle of a pandemic that is collapsing our healthcare system, and importantly, and more importantly, systematically taking the lives of our loved ones. With no shame, we put out messages every day asking, imploring, and demanding that people shelter in place, with only token opportunities for those living on the streets, in cars and shelters, on other people's couches or crowded apartments and homes to really be able to do so. In the midst of a pandemic, when one of the most important things we can do, both for ourselves, but also for those around us, is to shelter in place, we're having to argue from a health perspective why being housed is essential. Prior to COVID-19, we knew that the unjust state of housing in this county was creating disasters upon disasters. Asset stripping of Black, brown, and poor working class Angelenos and the criminalization of those living on the streets was already a public health disaster. The definitive and exhaustive evidence conclusively has demonstrated that denying any person access to shelter is denying them access to water, food, proper sanitation, and an ability to protect themselves from injury, cold, heat, and rain. These are pathways into acute and chronic disability and ultimately early mortality. It increases the risk of contracting infectious diseases, increases the risk of trauma and violence, it increases the risk of substance abuse and mental health illness, and pushes people towards a lifetime of struggle. It doesn't have to be this way, yet it is. A Robert Wood Johnson policy brief published in Health Affairs Journal in June of 2018 summarized the extensive literature on housing and its relationship to health. The author noted that housing was one of the best researched social determinants of health, and that there are 4 key pathways by which housing has an impact. With regards to health, housing stability, housing affordability, housing quality, and neighborhood level factors all mattered when thinking about this relationship. Foreclosures result in poor outcomes such as depression, anxiety, increased substance abuse, psychological distress, and suicide. Unstable housing can result in a loss of other health protective factors such as employment, education, community support, and social services. For those managing chronic conditions, unstable housing makes the healthcare management of these conditions even more difficult through the increased inability for medication adherence and storage. Not surprisingly, housing stability also has an impact on healthcare utilization. An intervention to increase housing stability for 10,000 residents of Oregon saw an approximate 20% decrease in emergency department visits and a 20% increase in outpatient primary care visits. This is a good thing. This is not only better for the patient, but the intervention also reduced the Medicaid expenditures of the city by 12%. Because of the lack of affordability in housing, the wages people make do not allow for them to afford the housing they need to have. Many families around the county are making decisions about what they can spend their money on, foregoing other vital needs in order to not lose the precarious housing they have in the first place. The stress from these decisions impacts health, putting people at increased risk of heart attacks and strokes, and compromises the ability to manage chronic disease such as diabetes. Behavioral health is also impacted. Those who lack access to affordable housing are most likely also postponing medical treatments. The impact that housing injustice has on communities also varies by stage of life. The elderly feel these insecurities and lack of affordability. The embryos, developing fetuses, our unborn babies are also feeling these heightened exposure to stress. Here is all the evidence as we know it. Housing is arguably the most essential determinant of health. It's connected to all the other ones. We know it's essential. We know affordability is essential. And we know housing insecurity and instability compromises a family's health on so many levels across all of its members for a very long time. The other point, though, I'd like to also comment on today is the public health impact of the policing response to the reclaimers' attempt to secure housing and health security for themselves. Many organizers and researchers discuss the role of policing and how it has built the wealth of this nation. Policing's racial roots are in anti-Black racism, We see this in the ways that policing as a practice is connected to the history of slave patrols. Policing in this country is also about anti-indigeneity, with its roots connected to protecting the quote unquote frontier, maintaining the racial boundary that violently forced the land under settler colonial rule. Policing has its roots in the maintenance of exploitative working conditions for immigrants. Policing also has its roots in the ways that this frontier expands beyond the United States and into other continents. Modern day policing has roots in tactics and techniques used to maintain other people's lands around the world. Policing has built the wealth of this nation and secured it. But what has been the health impact of this type of nation building? The state-sponsored police violence inflicted on poor working class communities of color and Black people in particular has resulted in death, disability, and so much heartache and pain, and the continuous reliving of trauma that has never been rectified. A 2018 American Public Health Statement titled Addressing Law Enforcement as a Public Health Issue summarized how policing causes both physical and psychological harm that includes depression, anxiety, psychological distress, and PTSD. In this context, arrest and incarceration also place a person in contexts that increase the risk of acquiring COVID-19 infection. The reclaimers here today are asking for a solution to the housing injustice that would protect them from the very same harms that the policing response to the request is causing. The irony of this should also not escape us today as well. And so the final point I'd like to make is that of solidarity. The victory of the reclaimed community is one of which we all need to be invested in. One of the most important lessons we can learn from the global movement for Black lives is that no one is free until everyone is free. The story of Los Angeles gentrification and housing precarity is a story of structural racism and its disproportionate impact on Black and Brown Angelenos. For decades, Black LA has been shifted, displaced, and in fact attempted to be banished. The solutions we seek here today need to be instated and scaled up and spread throughout the entire city. Ultimately, the answers to all these socially produced ills we're talking about lie in a new system and mode of relationality. The pandemic itself is the direct result of a vicious white supremacy whose quest for domination has no regard for anything sacred, be it land or the life which the land sustains. The solution here is one in which balances of power are shifted and people's lives are valued over profit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bita. It's important to know that the issues of housing and healthcare and policing are not isolated. Thank you for that. So next we're going to go to Ryan Bell, who is the Southern California Regional Coordinator for Tenants Together and an organizer with the Pasadena Tenants Union, as well as lives right in the middle of multiple Caltrans homes, or is a neighbor to multiple Caltrans homes. So Ryan, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to pause for a second and thank Bita for that amazing message. And I'm so happy that this is being recorded. I for one, I'm going to go back and listen to it again and take notes. And I sure hope the reporters here will review it carefully because it was on fire. So my name is Ryan Bell. I'm a tenant in Pasadena. As B has said, I'm a neighbor on 3 sides to Caltrans homes, some of which one of which I think is occupied, but I can't be sure, and others are empty. I'm an organizer with Tenants Together, which is a statewide nonprofit working to support tenant unions across the state and to protect tenants' rights and the security of the precariously housed. Anyone who pays rent to a landlord is precariously housed in the state of California, to say nothing of those who are unhoused and being forced from their homes. Before working for Tenants Together, I was a member and organizer, and still am, with the Pasadena Tenants Union, which works to build tenant power in our predominantly tenant-occupied city of Pasadena. About 55% of Pasadena residents are tenants, and there are very few protections here in Pasadena. While the attention is often focused across our region, El Sereno has been a center of focus for the Caltrans crisis around housing, but it also stretches north into Pasadena, where I live, and where many of my neighbors are experiencing the same problems, living in Caltrans homes that are neglected by Caltrans. And now, since just before Christmas, it appears that I live in a police state. On my daily walk around the neighborhood, I encounter no fewer than 5, sometimes 6 CHP vehicles parked in the driveways, engines idling, protecting, allegedly, these homes. And I've spoken to a couple of them as I walk around the neighborhood, and they tell me that they are there to secure these homes. And this, this is an outlay of hundreds of thousands of dollars remain vacant, and homeless individuals remain homeless. I mean, this is apparently the state's priority, is to make sure that the homeless remain without homes and vacant homes remain vacant. Meanwhile, there are hundreds of Pasadena residents without homes. The COVID crisis is as bad as it's ever been, and it's still getting worse in LA County. Every day, the Pasadena Tenants Union hears from tenants in crisis because they can't pay their rent due to a loss of work, a loss of income. Eviction protections are expiring at the end of this month in just 2 weeks, and there's no plan in place at the state level or at the county level to protect tenants past January, and in the county, perhaps February or March. Every day we hear about habitability issues from our tenants. Every day on our hotline in Pasadena, neglect, we hear about slumlords. But what is shocking is to be faced with constantly with the state of California as a slumlord. You heard Emille's call for Caltrans to get out. They are equipped and ill-equipped, and apparently don't care about being good caretakers of the property that they own, and they're hoarding it to the destruction of the community. We hear constantly about the need to build new housing, and this is true. We do need to build new housing, but more importantly and more immediate is the fact that we have housing and it's sitting empty in our neighborhoods. Not only that, but the state is employing its police power and the threat of violence to make sure these homes stay empty. This is the state's priority. Hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent every month to make sure these homes stay empty. It's a crime. The solution is staring us right in the face. We have homes, and many of the people without homes are the very people that used to live in these exact homes and simply want to return home. And the state has turned not only a cold shoulder, a blind eye to their problems. This is not a new problem. The state has been hoarding this property for 60 years. For 60 years, they've been acquiring these homes, treating the tenants badly, abusing them, raising the rents in erratic and illegal ways, not maintaining the facilities so that people have healthy and safe places to live. And so my final appeal here today is from the most local to the top. Use your power to change this situation. Stop wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars to police these empty homes. It makes us look like we live in the middle of a war zone with all this police power, all this violence occupying our communities. So to Steve Madison, the city council member in District 6, where these homes in the Pasadena portion of these homes are, to Chris Holden, who is our state assembly member, Anthony Portantino, who is our state assembly member in this area, all the way to Gavin Newsom and the other electeds, Kevin De Leon, as you heard Emille talking about a moment ago. They have the power to change this. They have the power, and they just choose not to. And so this is a crisis of our choosing. And they need to hear from us nonstop until this problem is solved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It is important to know that a ton of, just millions of renters in California are about to face a wave of eviction threats and eviction and and houselessness. So appreciate you bringing that to light. I do want to just let all of our press folks know that we're running a little bit over time. So we're going to ask you to possibly stay on a little bit after, until a little bit after 11. We might wrap up around then. But yeah, so, oh, and by the way, the expenditure of CHP along the 710 corridor is actually closer to, even figuring conservatively, to close to $2 million a month, especially having just found out that many CHP units make a 2-hour trip all the way from San Diego. Okay, so next we have Daniel Turner-Lloveras, MD, who's an assistant professor of medicine at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA, Harbor-UCLA Medical Center. And is at the Harbor-UCLA Medical Center Division of General Internal Medicine. Thank you, David, for speaking here. I'm sorry, Daniel. Are you here? Thank you. Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted. If you could unmute, Daniel.
Got it. Okay. Everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for the introduction. And wow, amazing speaker so far. I just want to echo Ryan Bell's statements. Those who pay rent are precariously housed. And we, for some reason, think that if someone has an apartment, they're paying rent, that everything is stable. However, we need to do more to make sure that those who are paying rent, those who are currently homeless, have a safe home. This is critical during a pandemic. Even before the pandemic, we know there's a direct relationship between housing and health. And sort of, we need to do all the things to bring back security in housing so that people can live as healthy of a life as possible. As Dr. Bita Amani said, also the role of police. They've been a part of nation building, but what has been their role to improve the lives of marginalized communities? We have seen again and again physical, psychological harm, physical and psychological harm, and this needs to stop. Policing should be something that makes us feel more secure, makes us feel safe, and that's not really happening in communities, in Black and Brown communities across the country. Also, it leads to more incarceration, which everyone knows and studies have shown greatly increases your risk for contracting COVID-19. And these are not the things we need to be doing. We need to be doing things that we know studies have shown will lead to a decrease in the risk of transmission, will lead to a decreased risk of harm and death from COVID-19. And, this pandemic has really brought into sort of reality the intimate nexus between housing and health. They really go hand in hand, and we really can't be saying that we're focusing on health and creating interventions to improve health while ignoring housing, because it will just limit all of these other interventions that we're trying to do to improve the health of our communities. We need to be the moratoria on evictions and foreclosures. This needs to be, brought into the limelight. We need to have, insurability of long-term housing. We need to have fair housing laws and direct threat exemption. We need to realize that housing is a human right and something that the government has a primary responsibility for ensuring its achievement. And if the police are representatives of the government, then the government needs to let CHP know that we can't be evicting people right now. Housing policy is health policy. And that really needs to be just a blanket statement needs to be in the headlines, because once we realize that housing policy is health policy, right now, even the CDC recognizes this fact. The CDC is recommending increased spending to ensure that people have stable homes. If ever it was more important, if you look at what's going on right now in Los Angeles, hospitals are at capacity. Now, when you have a patient who has survived COVID-19 and is being ready for discharge, there's one thing you always must do before you can discharge them, and that's secure housing. If they do not have housing, you cannot discharge them. And when our hospitals are at 100% capacity, this is harmful. I mean, we are trying to make room. We're trying to get beds available. And without housing for many of these patients, they can't leave the hospital, which means this zero capacity, zero beds available problem is not going to go away. And these things go hand in hand, and we really need to be focusing on that so that government will soon act to ensure that families and individuals can get access to housing. And if they're not already housed, that we do things to make sure that they're not at risk of losing their housing. We need to address the homelessness crisis right now. History has shown this is where oftentimes outbreaks happen. We have had recent tuberculosis outbreaks. We've had typhoid outbreaks. COVID-19 is just another disease that's going to be shown to spread easily among these communities, and they need to be put in housing. If we're really trying to flatten the curve, if we're really trying to, people are talking about the new tomorrow, that really can't be discussed in depth logically without bringing up and focusing on the importance of housing in these communities. And so, there's been a disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on communities of color. We have racism, we have a cultural mistrust, we have miscommunication, we have chronic illness. And this miscommunication and mistrust now has come into the limelight because we have our COVID-19 vaccines, but there's hesitancy. And why is there hesitancy? There's hesitancy because there's a feeling of mistrust with the government. This is the government's chance to let the people know that there should be no reason to mistrust the government. And they can show that by providing housing, by providing the things that they need to live a healthy life. And by showing them rather than just telling them, I think we can really address a lot of the issues with this vaccine hesitancy, because we'll never reach herd immunity. We'll never see the new tomorrow until we get vaccinated, until people want to get vaccinated, and we reach the herd immunity. And all of these things go hand in hand. Once again, housing policy is health policy, and I think we should really focus on that right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Turner-Lloveras. Housing policy is health policy. That shows you, our housing policy kind of reflects what our elected officials, how they consider our health. Next, we have Erika Feresten, who is a political advocate and activist, director for Healthcare for All Los Angeles, and delegate to the California Democratic Party. Erika, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Erika Feresten. I am Director of Healthcare for All Los Angeles, along with Maureen Cruz, and co-chair along with Betty Dumas-Toto. Healthcare for All Los Angeles is a local chapter of a nonprofit, all volunteer statewide organization dedicated to getting single payer, or Medicare for All, as it's popularly known now, here in the state of California, where every California resident is guaranteed the same high standard and comprehensive health care, regardless of employment status, regardless of income level, regardless of health condition, marital status, race, sexual orientation. And so, as it was so beautifully articulated by Dr. Turner, health and housing go hand in hand. Housing is health. Healthcare and housing are human rights. Before I say what I have to say, I really want to acknowledge Emille for sharing her story and putting a face on this. And she is right, this can happen to anyone. And I also want to acknowledge the young woman who did the land acknowledgement in the beginning. And I think this, you know, what we're seeing here is the same themes over and over again. Systemic racism, all tied to capitalism, where money and property are valued over human life. And here in America, as we can clearly see, we have white supremacist capitalism. And this is what our elected officials seem to be owned by. They're owned by these corporations. And the young man, Ryan, you know, really made some important points. This is a crisis of their choosing. This is the housing crisis, healthcare crisis has been going on long before COVID. But like video cameras have finally shown other segments of the population what people of color have known for a long time about the violence inflicted upon them and their communities by law enforcement. You know, COVID-19 is showing other people the violence that's being inflicted through lack of health care, through a system that we have. For those who can pay for healthcare, they get great healthcare. And for those who can't, they're left to suffer. They're left to go medically bankrupt and lose their housing. We're the only country in the world that has the term medical bankruptcy. Over half of the bankruptcies in the United States are due to medical bills. It's oftentimes, you know, a serious illness or injury that starts the downward spiral for many into being unhoused. And so it's just, I don't think that there's much more I can add that hasn't already been stated, except yet, you know, just another voice to say enough is enough. The solutions are there. These Caltrans houses need to be sold to the land trust. The community needs to have these homes to care for their own. And, you know, this isn't rocket science here. If I can know this, I'm sure our elected officials can know this, but they refuse. And as Emille said earlier, you know, they put out empty platitudes for votes. And so I'm just really here to say that we are here in solidarity. And we are here to uplift your voices. And we are here because all of this housing, healthcare, racism, they're all interconnected. And it's time that we do, as co-founder of Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Cullors says, that we shift from an economy of punishment to an economy of care. That we stop criminalizing the poor and start doing our job to create a society where we can all thrive. You know, COVID has shown our neighbor's health is our health. So even if you're selfish and don't really care about other people, well, then understand that, you know, from a medical point of view, that if people do not have their basic needs met, you know, a lack of housing is they don't have the personal hygiene, they don't have the nutrition, and COVID-19 and tuberculosis and whatever pandemic is coming next doesn't discriminate between the housed and the unhoused. So I really, again, appreciate all of you who have been in this fight. And just, we're here to join you in this fight. And I guess beg and plead with our elected officials to please do the right thing, sell these Caltrans homes to the community trust, and provide housing. You know, like Emille said, these are people these are working people. I heard a story of a mom. I'm a mom. I have 2 kids. They're on Zoom right now. There's a mom who is in a precarious housing situation. She's been looking for affordable housing because her young child is at home and she can't go to work unless she pulls her child out of school. I mean, these are the terrible situations that people are facing. People decide, do I pay for the medicine I need, or do I pay for rent? We are the richest nation in the world, and this is cruel. It is cruel what's happening here. And, you know, you've all heard the phrase, silence is compliance. Well, our elected officials who are doing nothing, that's compliance. They're responsible for this. But as Ryan said, they have the power to change this. And so with every fiber of my being, I stand with you guys asking them to please use their power. The solutions are there. Just use their power to make them happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erika. Really important to highlight the financial, you know, cost burden of healthcare. It's so ridiculous. The U.S. is especially unique in that sense, and you know, obviously, politicians know what needs to be done for us to access, you know, for the ones that need the most access housing and healthcare, but they don't do it. You know, we see that our laws are fundamentally racist and anti-poor, you know, even you know, allocating funding for these CHP units. You know, we can probably renovate, you know, these abandoned homes. We can probably renovate 5 abandoned homes per week, you know, with the money that they're spending on that. So it's really ridiculous. So, you know, seeing that these laws and politicians are not fighting for us, you know, that's why you see this bold community action to take their own self-determination into their own hands and make these bold moves. And that's especially why the El Sereno Community Land Trust exists, to put control of community of housing in the community back in the hands of the community. And Alejandra Liera is actually in front of a Caltrans home now, where there is a CHP guarding it, just so you can have that visual. So I'm going to throw it over to her just really quickly. We're probably going to start our Q&A a few minutes after 11. And so so I want to humbly ask and our speakers and our reporters to just hold on just a little bit longer till we get to the Q&A. Thank you so much. Alejandra? Oh, Alejandra, I think you're muted.
Hi, thank you. So sorry, I was adjusting my camera, making sure that you were able to see that there's a CHP, actually 2 CHP officers behind me at an abandoned home, which is very, very sad. I'm like, my hands are shaking right now because this is a very uncomfortable situation to be in, to see these CHPs, guarding these homes that are abandoned, that could be housing, families, that could be housing elders, they could be housing members of our community. But instead, they sit there empty with CHP officers. As a person of color, my hands are shaking because we know that having CHP or police is not a positive, it doesn't turn out to be a positive experience. And I would like to believe that, the senators and elected officials are wanting to help, but their solution is not working. Let's just put that out there. The solution that has been out there has not been housing people, has not been supporting people. And so we need to come up with an alternative solution. We all know that, and we need to come together and really sit down and really brainstorm and come up. We have a solution. We're offering a solution. And the reclaimers, that's another approach, that's another solution. And so even though it is different from what we're trying to do from the land trust, we need to remain in solidarity to really come up with a equitable solution for this housing crisis that is happening, not just in El Sereno, not just in Los Angeles, but all over the country. And there has been proven that community land trusts have supported with that. And we're going to be having a town hall on January 23rd, the El Sereno Community Land Trust, to talk about our solution and to talk about other ways to solve this huge housing crisis, because it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. We're in the midst of a pandemic. People are losing their jobs. They're getting laid off. And if we don't act now, if we don't take this serious, then we are not, there's going to be more people who are not going to have homes. And as people were speaking about health justice and about health and housing, yes to all that. So let's come together as a community. I urge all the elected officials to come together and really hear us out and really work with us, really work with us and coming up with a solution that is going to be fair, that's going to be just, that's going to have community involvement, community and land stewardship, right? And when we mean land stewardship, we're also including the Tongva, because we're on stolen land. Let's just say what it is. We're on stolen land, and we need to make sure that we change our relationship to the land. No one owns this land, right? We have to have a relationship with this land, and it's so important that we include the Tongva in these conversations as well. So I just want to leave you with that, and I want to leave you with just seeing what's there, right? These empty homes that could be housing people, but instead they're being guarded by CHP. Let that sink in, folks. Let that sink in. And for those who are watching, we really need to make a change, really make a change, right? And so I invite you all to the town hall, the El Sereno Community Land Trust Town Hall, January 23rd, and let's talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alejandra, for putting yourself in that position, precarious position. I know, I can imagine what you were feeling. And we definitely need to immediately explore these alternative, more sustainable solutions for housing, because the current housing model, we're seeing proof everywhere that it's obviously not working for many folks. So now we actually have a recorded video. Do we want to go to that, Lene?
Yeah. Can you introduce Suzie while I pull up the video?
Oh yeah, sure thing. Sorry. Yeah. So actually, you know, it's Suzie Abajian, and you know, actually, is Robert Roberto? Are you around?
She's been a school board member for several years in South Pasadena.
Sorry about that.
No,
Thank you.
that's okay.
I didn't have that information in front of me.
That's all right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Sorry, let me just.
For the past 18 days since New Year's Eve, Caltrans has placed 50 CHP officers to guard its empty properties along the 710 freeway corridor. They have done this to prevent these properties from being occupied by unhoused people. I think that this is incredibly problematic when they've spent approximately over $2 million of taxpayer monies to guard empty properties when we have a huge housing crisis in California. And not to mention, we have the underfunding of our schools. We're at the bottom of per pupil funding in California, and yet we are wasting all this money to guard empty properties. I call on the governor of California to immediately stop this and to affirm the process of either selling these properties to the current tenants or enabling these properties to turn into affordable housing for families.
Thank you all. So B, do you want to discuss questions or do you want me to explain that?
Oh, you can go for it if you'd like.
Okay, so if you want to submit a question, feel free to raise your hand. We just didn't want folks speaking over one another. And if you would rather submit via the chat, you can message that to myself or Bijan, and we can go ahead and ask for you. Just let us know also who it's directed to, or if it's like an open-ended question. I also just enabled you all to unmute yourselves. That was changed earlier, so you should be able to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question, but it would be great if you could raise your hand as like just so that we don't get too wild. I know there were some questions. I got a few emails from people asking about the math on the estimate about what CHP is spending. And so that was arrived at by looking at CHP salaries, which let me pull up. I was just drafting an email response to somebody, so let me pull that up real quick. So as it's been mentioned by several people, there's about 50 to 60 CHP officers 24/7, 26 plus, and Robert will have better numbers, but most of them are dedicated to specific houses and many others are patrolling around. And so the math adds up to about 2 million. And that math was arrived at because the CHP officer salary is about $97,956 a year or $8,163 monthly. So when we broke that down math-wise, that came to approximately $816 a day per house, plus those who are patrolling the areas. So I'd like to, just point out here that for $816 a day, imagine how far that could go for housing people and getting people just what they need to survive. But instead that those funds are being allocated to CHP. Caltrans has, I know several reporters in here have spoken to Caltrans already. So Caltrans has said that they are footing the bill for this. However, I think it's important to note that they are still a state agency. So those funds are coming from state funds. So that's how we arrived on the math. If you want to reach out for that, like those numbers specifically, I'm happy to share. And if you don't have background context for this story or who reclaimers are, feel free to, I've put in the chat for people who are in here, you can email RROC2021@protonmail.com and we'll get back to you with information on Caltrans presence, the reclaiming action from ROH and the reclaiming action from RROC, as well as relations. I've shared updates on relations with a few politicians in the chat, so you'll see updates on Kevin De Leon and Senator Durazo and their actions. So feel free to chime in. Oh, I do see one hand raised. Go ahead, Margaret.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Thank you all for speaking so eloquently today. Just, it really feels like this is kind of like an amplification, right, of your call to Caltrans, to elected officials to sell these homes, right? I mean, am I correct in that?
You're correct in that. And I do want to say that the call is for Caltrans, I mean, in an ideal situation would be to allow the reclaimers back into the homes that they were attempting to reclaim as a priority, and also to sell these homes to the El Sereno Community Land Trust. So there's a, if you're not familiar with the Roberti bill, I recommend looking into it. It essentially says that in this sort of situation, when houses and property have been purchased by way of eminent domain, that if they're being unused, as these houses are, they're, they should be declared surplus and sold back to the community. So the demand would be that the El Sereno Community Land Trust is able to purchase these homes at their original price in accordance with the Roberti bill. And this way, the Community Land Trust can make community-driven decisions about housing versus there's folks who are reclaimers who they've tried all of the paths that people say you're supposed to try, such as HACLA and PATH, and they've been on waiting lists sometimes for years. So clearly it's not ideal for HACLA to have these houses and instead the community have these houses. Chris, oh, this is a good point, Chris. I didn't know how to raise my hand either today. If you go to reactions at the bottom of Zoom, there's a raise hand feature. Chris said, I don't have the raise or unmutability. Is there any conversations between El Sereno Community Land Trust and officials since Thanksgiving? Alejandra, do you mind like speaking on that? Would that be okay? I think, let me see if she's able to speak on that, because I don't want to.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So the question from Chris was, has there been any conversations between the El Sereno Community Land Trust and officials since Thanksgiving?
Yes, there has. We actually had a good meeting with Ida Solis representatives, and we also been having conversations with Kevin De Leon, which Kevin De Leon's office has been a little bit more willing to hear us out. We're working on following up. There has been communication.
Okay, that is helpful. Does that answer your question, Chris? And then I see one other. Elizabeth, you have a question? I think you're muted still. Do you mind unmuting?
Yeah, okay, cool. So yeah, I was the mention of the Roberti bill flashed by real quick, but that I was wondering, can you initiate like, an offer of some kind, or have you done that already to buy? And what has been the response?
That is a good question for the Land Trust. Do you mind speaking on that again? Sorry. Because I'm not as familiar with what the Land Trust has proposed.
Actually, I'm not too familiar with the Roberti law. I believe that's UCT, but any other information, I can't really share that at the moment. But if you would like more information on the land trust and what we're proposing, I invite you all to please join us at the town hall that we're having January 23rd. And you can find that on our social media and on our website.
If I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong, and maybe you're not able to speak to this from the land trust perspective, but to my understanding, these houses can't be sold until Caltrans decides to sell them. So if that helps answer your question, Liz, you know, similar to anyone else's house, like, you know, you can tell people all you want that you might want to buy a house, but until they're willing to sell, it doesn't become an option. Okay, and let me see, I just want to make sure I'm not missing anyone else's questions. I also, I think I mentioned it before, but I did put in the chat updates about, like I said, I can just read through them actually in case anyone's in a situation where they can't check the chat right now. So for context on Kevin De Leon, because he's been brought up several times specifically, you know, when the reclaiming was happening in November, he did issue a statement in support of reclaimers in which he said that he and his team worked the night prior to secure vouchers. And he received a lot of praise for that. However, you know, after several weeks of trying to get those vouchers from his office, I think that statement was issued November 26th, if I'm not mistaken. And on December 16th, 3 weeks later, after hours and hours of calls and being sent to different offices, reclaimers learned that there were no vouchers. So that was just really harmful and just damaging to know that somebody would say that they had a potential, at least short-term solution for people. And then to learn that they didn't have that, which from the outside looking in also was frustrating to see someone frame it as if they'd worked hard the night before to secure vouchers and then find out that there were no vouchers. So I'm not sure exactly what was being worked on. But since then, as some people who are familiar with the area know, Kevin De Leon, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Bede, feel free to jump in if I'm wrong, he is in jeopardy of losing his position if he doesn't have like a very clear plan on how to house, I think it's about 700 or 800 folks who are living along the freeway. And so since then, he has shifted his plan for that solution to essentially take RROC's plan to help himself stay in office, but still done nothing for reclaimers who essentially have inspired his plan that will keep him in office. So that's been really frustrating. And with Senator Durazo, she and Wendy Carrillo issued a joint statement on Twitter on the week of November 26th, stating that none of the reclaimers were from El Sereno, which they would have no way to know because they've never spoken to the group. So I don't know why, you know, they would say that other than to make reclaimers look bad. So that was really harmful and painful for a lot of reclaimers to be told that, because as Emille said on hers, like she was raised in El Sereno and has lived there for decades. And that's very true for the majority of reclaimers, which was damaging. And then in a future interview, she went on to essentially imply that reclaimers were not unhoused, stating that everyone who was arrested had a permanent address. And I just want to call out that having, you know, being able to use a cousin or a friend's address as your mailing address is not the same as having somewhere to live. Additionally, of the 60 people that were arrested, many of those were supporters and not reclaimers, because some reclaimers weren't in a position where they felt comfortable getting arrested, or you know, they just weren't able to stay there at the houses and face arrest. They were scared, so they left. So using that as a stat was just really, really harmful and damaging and just dishonest. So that was very frustrating. We have a couple questions. So, okay, so yeah, the El Sereno Community Land Trust Town Hall is January 23rd, 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Folks who are on here probably have my email. You can email me at lenecook@gmail.com, which is how this press release was distributed. Or you can email RROC2021@protonmail.com and request the link for that, and we can share that out. Bita says that she has to leave. I'm just going to go ahead and read her message out loud. I have to leave. Thank you for your work, and we look forward to your victories. If we don't dramatically stop and put into place these new systems across housing, healthcare, and education, we will continue to see premature mortality and increased disease and disability. The only antidote, there is no vaccine, to the lack of housing, housing instability, housing insecurity, is to guarantee quality, affordable housing to the people. Anything short of this is an indicator that white property, white life, and whiteness still have supremacy in this land. These are the roots of vaccine hesitancy as well. A new mode of relating in housing will demonstrate to the people that the past is the past. It will set up communities to thrive and improve the public health of this entire county. Thank you, Bita. If no one else has any other questions, I think we can go ahead and close. Thank you so much all for being here. I will follow up with a YouTube link for this probably later tomorrow night. If you need it more urgently, please let me know.
Thank you so much to all our speakers for joining us and participating in this. Thank you so much, everyone.